I can say that because I'm Canadian. I do apologize. I am just hopped up on cold medicine like there's no tomorrow. So if I ramble a little bit, just bring me back. Just bring me back. Just like you would a good friend, right? So... a little bit louder. You can do a little bit louder. All right. So I'm Canadian, but I'm based in New York. And where I work in New York is what I like to call the armpit of the universe. And I think you can guess where I'm talking about. I'm talking about Times Square. And we have this lovely office in Times Square. And outside there's this balcony. And, when you look down on the street, you see this. And I worked with a good friend of mine. His name was Jesus. I thought it was really funny. Every time he texted me, it would show up as like, Jesus says. And he'd be like, where are you at? And I was like, don't you know? And so Jesus and I are hanging out on the balcony. And I'm looking down the street, and I start yelling, and I'm like, Dave! Dave! He's like, who's Dave? Tell me who Dave is. Where's Dave? And I was like, I don't frickin' know. Someone down there has got to be a Dave. And Jesus starts laughing, and he's like, man, I need more of that. And I said, well, what is that? Like, what are you saying? And he's just, I need more of that idea of having a little bit of fun in every day, having a little bit of fun in work. And so today, I think, is a little bit about a story about a person like me at a big company, and how do I do it? How do I retain who I am? And how do I still manage to find fun in the everyday? And how can you do that in your jobs too? Because I think we take ourselves very seriously. And I want to step away from that for a little bit. And so I started to think about when was the last time I celebrated any accomplishment at work. And I started to really look at my attitude, and this was like about a year and a half ago, and I was getting a little cynical, fuck this, fuck that, and I would get emails, and I would just be instantly angered over just dumb things, and I started to look at all these little warning hints, and I had no attention span, right? Like, literally, right? And I was exhausted, and completely exhausted all the time. And I had this incredible inability to finish anything. I would get to the finish line, and I would see it, and I'd be like, meh, not today, right? And I felt like everything I was doing was just kind of, circular in that method. And I also started to just be super, irrational about some of my reactions about things, right? I mean, this is a corgi. A corgi should not feel that way about a cabbage. But, you go get it, you know what I mean? And imagine me getting an email, and this is my reaction on the other end that you can't see, right? And I should not have that feeling. And it's that idea of just being completely unmotivated. And, and I had nothing to complain about. I have absolute freedom in what I do most of the time. And at this time, I started to realize, oh, shit, I'm burnt out, right? So all the things I described to you, how many people have gone through that before in their everyday job, right? All those things, if you look at them, and I did this, it's really scary, they're actually signs of depression. And you're like, oh no. And living in America, where pharmaceutical companies are allowed to do direct-to-consumer advertising, I was like, maybe I need to go tell my doctor what I need to take, and maybe I'll just deal with all the side effects, the instant diarrhea and the inability to breathe and the potential heart attacks, because I'm going to feel better about my everyday, right? And Again, that's not a diss on medication. It was just that process that I was going through to figure out what was going on with me, because in my everyday, I felt pretty happy. I knew I wasn't feeling the same about what I was doing, and how could I change it? And I realized that signs of burnout are very similar to depression. And it's funny because I think that we all know someone who's been affected by depression, and it's just something you don't fuck with, right? Triggers. I'm going to swear. And it's something you don't screw around with. And then when it comes to work, why don't we treat burnout the same way? Why do we look at it differently? And so I didn't really have anyone to kind of like, hey, stop, girl. You got to stop doing this. You don't need to do all this stuff. Chill out. No, listen to me. I didn't have anyone like that. By the way, I can do voiceover for gifts all day long. Right? And I started to try to think about, like, what are some ways that I can just reinvent the wheel of what I'm doing now? Because I think we all come to that area or position in our life where we're in a job, and the job is good, and there's nothing wrong with it. And maybe you're not as challenged, or maybe you're trying to figure out your place. Or you're just stagnant, but you have no reason to leave your job, right? And I think that we put a lot of ownership on our employers. You're not challenging me. You're not giving me opportunities. You. Instead of, what are you actively doing to create that for yourself? Because the one thing I've learned over the last couple of years is that you do what you want now and ask for forgiveness later, right? And so this is, if anything, this presentation is going to be enabling you all to go do this. And all your employers will probably mass email me and hate me. Yes, bring it, bitches. Right? So I started to think about being a kid and how when you have kids and you give them a box, suddenly they have entire worlds that they've created, right? And so they're looking and they've got these kitchens and they've got, a whole airplane and all those great things. And then I was like, well, this is amazing. Kids can just transform anything, into something great. And then I thought, well, what about adults? So if you search on Google, this is what it tells me, right? And so it tells me, well, it's about getting stuff done. It's about responsibility. It's about putting those things into that kind of block. And I started to get really uncomfortable with this. And so I look towards kids, and you give them a cape, and they create a world around them. And you give an adult a cape, and they're escaping the world, right? They're like, oh, shit, reality, cape, I'm safe. Do-do-do. And it's this weird thing. And so I guess my question is, have we forgotten how to play? Because I know I did. And I'm a person who grew up instilled in me a sense of play, instilled in me humor, instilled in me not taking yourself too seriously. And I understand everyone's not like that. But, there is a reason why my dad put aside $1,500 because he thought I was going to get arrested one day. And there's a reason why he won't go to Costco with me anymore, because I literally grab all the Costco boxes of condoms and drop them in his cart and be like, you're going to need these, son. And he just goes the other way. And I was brought up in an environment, that's my parents' tactic. They're just like, just walk away. Just walk away from her. But there's a reason I was brought up in this environment. And when I'm in an environment where that's not inherently valued, it becomes very difficult. So I came from advertising and marketing where that's kind of valued. Many companies nowadays have like innovation labs, and like you're going to go into a room and you're suddenly going to innovate. Like, oh, open the door, innovation. Like it happens that way. But you start to see it like in more creative kind of areas. And then I go to Microsoft, right? Which, by the way, is one of my best places I've ever worked. But I mean, come on. Do you know how much email I get a day? Right? And it's this corporate structure that I'm not used to. And I'm like, how can I start to play here a little bit? Because if I don't, I'm going to lose who I am. And I'm also going to lose some opportunities, I think, in being here. And so, how do I make this happen? And I started to look around me and started to realize even people I work with have kind of forgotten how to play. I'd toss them a nugget, and they'd be like, whoa, how do I pick that up, right? And so how do I not only do this for myself, but how do I bring this back to my team? And I think one of the things that we do as a community right now is we take things very, very seriously. And so serious that we're willing to go and comment the shit out of anything to prove our point, to prove that we know better than someone else, right? This is, by the way, the best comment thread I've ever seen in my life. And it starts to instill this, jerk mentality, right? We're not supporting each other. We're pushing each other down because we want people to know how much we know. And again, you forget how to play. And we're looking for those opportunities, right? Or creating them instead of sharing them and bringing them back. And we become timid. We become scared, a little scared about trying new things, right? And just when you think you have the hang of something, it all changes. This is web dev to me, right? And when you think about web dev, how much more true could this be, right? You now have 47 steps to get started instead of just one simple one. And so creativity has changed, and we've also devalued it over time. We've changed it into something else. And we've also segmented people in terms of creativity. Oh, you're a developer, therefore you're not creative. Developers are some of the most creative mofos out there, let me tell you. Go look at Git commits. Go look at some of the comments people do. Go look at the hacks and the workarounds they come up with. And so you start to look at that, and creativity for some of us developers are based on what have you done that, what have you done that has created efficiencies in workflow, right? And suddenly you're creative because you just saved the company X amount of time, right? And so I guess my question to you is, how can we play at work, and how can we let it be okay? And how can you bring it back and make it part of your culture? And not in a way that's unprofessional, but in a way where you're allowing people to explore, right? And so for me, when I looked at this was a turning point. I knew that if I didn't do something that, I'd probably leave and do something else, but I didn't feel right with that. And I knew there was an opportunity. And at this time at work, it was very encouraged that people got into IoT, right? The world's vaguest term. Like Internet of Things. Thanks. It's like saying connected stuff, right? And so I was very encouraged. And for me, this was like, ooh, you just opened up a sandbox. I'm going to go play. And so for me, I think most people like to laugh, and I like to build useless things. And so I started trying to figure out how to basically dig myself out of burnout by doing things that amused me. Now, number one thing I can tell you to do, if you hate your job, if you're burnt out, change your password to something really amusing. Every time you log in, it's a beautiful experience. You laugh every time, and I do that. My passwords are ridiculous, to the point I couldn't share them because I'd be like, you're instantly going to judge me, right? But, I started to look at those things, and I started to figure out, how can I kind of start playing with people? And one of the first things I did was I got this email, and it was this crazy reply all thread. You can imagine a big corporation. There's thousands of people on it. And I was like, I'm going to make a flow chart. So I made this flow chart, and my good friend Val had, made it look better than I had. And it was really funny. I was at a conference in Halifax, and one of the news teams were like, we'd love to have you on the morning news, and we'd love to have you go through your flow chart, right? We're not sure about the word turd nugget, but we think it'll fly. I'm like, it's 6 a.m., it's Halifax. You're going to have 3 people watching. I think they'll be okay with turd nugget, right? But it was one of those things where I did this, and someone in the company found it externally and started sharing it. So my own thing came back to me internally about an internal thing from a different source. And so I started to do these little things like this every day. And the next thing I did is I went to Facebook, and I started to use the Facebook API because I had spent years doing that. And I looked at, can I comment on the oldest pictures I can find? Right? Because you get notifications, and that's super creepy. As stated by this next comment, right? So I automatically would write like, looking good, guys, or this is awesome, or whatever. And suddenly I'm getting all these messages on Facebook like, what are you doing, dude? It's like 2 a.m. And I would literally program it so it was like 4:30 in the morning. You know, you're like Stacey's been in the sauce and she's on the Facebook, you know, like that weird behavior that we've cultivated. I'm the epitome of it. But it's just a little script that's running. And so I did that for a while. It took a while for people to kind of catch on. And then, you know, I get a lot of like vacation FOMO, like, oh, you're away, it looks beautiful. And so I went to Instagram, and I would send the picture up to a service that we'd have that would look for things in the picture. So basic kind of like, you know, object recognition, OpenCV. And I would look for things like beaches, drinks, you know, things that like, why ain't I there, right? And I started doing this with Instagram, where someone would have a beautiful picture, and I'd automatically write, that's okay, I guess. You know? And this started to take off a little bit. People thought that was pretty good. And I realized at this point, not everything has to be absolutely useful. And I had this argument a couple weeks ago. I was judging a hackathon, and I was very, very lucky to be amongst the judges that I was with. It was, you know, the CTO of New York. Did you know that even exists? I was like, this is amazing. That's a job? Like, how do you get that? I was with all these, you know, a startup founder, etc., and they didn't like any of the hacks because they weren't useful, right? And this group of students made this awesome hack where you could basically print onto toast, right? And so it was like they would move the toast in a like it was like they didn't blow up the building, so they should just win automatically. And I was like, but that's amazing. Like, look at what the obstacles, you know, they had to come across. And so it was this argument. Well, it's not useful. How do you know it's not useful? Because not everything that you see at first glance ends up, you know, being what it should be. Like sometimes it for the lack of a better word, I feel like everyone should drink at this. It pivots, right? I did it. I said pivot. And it changes into something else, and that's okay too. And so, you know, I realized not everything has to be useful. And so I started to collaborate with a couple people because I thought, you know what, I need help. I need help to get motivated. I need help to get out of the slump. And I realized that experimental things will find their application. They will. And it shouldn't stop you from doing them. If you don't, you shouldn't have to articulate its use. Sometimes it can just be beautiful to experience. Sometimes it can just make you feel something. And that's equally of value, at least to me. Maybe not your employer. And so I started working with my friend Dave Scheinkoff out of New York, who's really smart. And we built something called Grid A Kit A. And I decided I'm going to learn more hardware because I knew a little bit about hardware. But, you know, I knew hardware in the safe way, right? I can plug in my Arduino. I can do the Blink sketch, you know, and then you put it away. How many people have done that? How many people admit to having dust on their Arduino? You won't after today, right? And so we started talking about, like, oh, if we can invent something, what would be the epitome of it? Where, like, the epitome of it would be for it to be on Sky Mall. How many people know what Sky Mall is? How many people have been on a plane? That's a better question, right? You open up the magazine, Sky Mall, it's like solving problems you didn't know you had, right? And so we started to look for Sky Mall for inspiration, and Sky Mall had some beautiful things, you know, things for comfort, things for style. You know, you want to make a new friend? It had it for you. Your quality of life definitely improved through Sky Mall. You know, you're a business person, it's got a solution for you, right? Maybe you're the proud owner of some fur babies. it has what you need. And so we started to look at this, and I was like, Dave always kind of called me a cat lady. I don't have any cats, so I don't really understand what he thinks a cat lady is, because my understanding is a cat lady means you need to have cats. I think it's contingent, but I'm not sure. Come to me afterwards if I'm wrong. And so, because I would always be like, oh, I can't do this, can't do that. And he's like, you're staying home with your cats? And I was like, let's build something around that. And so we're starting to think about cats in general and what happens when you have cats. When you have one, they seem to multiply and you get multiple. As a cat owner, if you don't buy your cat the wrong food, you leave your computer on, suddenly your cat's logging into your computer, and it's logging on Facebook and posting selfies. When you're not home, your cat's a complete asshole, just eating like an animal out of the fruit bowl, right? And then when you fall, this is what you see, because that cat's just waiting for the moment that you have no breath and it can eat your face. Right? This is all truth, right? And we researched, what are some things online that we could buy that are cat paraphernalia? And this is a deep, deep, dark tunnel you do not want to go. I did it for you. I took one for the team here. You do not want to do this. See you later. Book a vacation, right? And so we started to find these, figurines that were kind of realistic, right? And they're creepy. Right? And so we found these little ones, and when you start to read them, you start to realize that they're actually made out of rabbit hair. So think about that. That's pretty creepy. And we took one of these items, and we took it apart, and we put a teensy in it. We put not lasers, but little LEDs for the eyes, and then sewed some conductive thread down the back of the cat. And I thought, what if I could replace my mouse with a cat? How goddamn meta is that? I just won the internet, right? And what we did is we created a Node.js application that goes to Instagram. It searches for the tag Kitteh, so Kitteh. Also, careful. And allows you to go through and scroll through these images, and then if you press the head of it for an extended period of time, it'll download one of those images and put it into your Dropbox, right? Because of course you're going to want to save these images. I should warn you, what I'm showing you here, it doesn't really show any technical prowess, right? You're like, yeah, I could do that. I did that. It was a quick little easy thing to do. But being able to do this for a couple hours meant that I could go back to work and do anything, right? And that's what I'm trying to suggest with some of these things, is these little moments of play that I can bring this back to work, and I did. I showed this at we have offsites where your team gets together, and I showed this, and they're like, it was silence in the room. They're like, and then everyone's kind of because people are like, hey, I built this app that does this, or I changed the world with this, and I'm like, hey, guess what I did? And it became one of those things where I was willing to kind of expose a little bit of my personality, but also, these are the things that I think are interesting and valuable. I mean, would you rather see me demo this to you, or be like, I'm going to show you how to build a weather shield? Right? They have different kind of, values to them. And so I started building these little projects. The next one, this one I actually did, I started before I was at Microsoft, and it's carried on, and we've done a couple versions of them. I only have the first original one, because I think it's probably the worst one to show. But this is definitely one of those things where I was like, I want to learn a little bit more about hardware. And so we were looking at that, what does it feel like to be a developer? Because as a developer, there's certain things that happen that I think are very developer-centric in ways that you can kind of bond with each other. And so, just thinking about writing code and that moment where you write 50 lines of code and suddenly it works. And you didn't test any of it. It's just 50 lines straight and it works. Has anyone done that? Okay, so that moment, right, you're like this. Oh, like I'm a golden god, right? And no one understands why you're so excited. And then you're like, shit, no, wait, too good to be true. I don't trust this shit. What happened here, right? Nah, this can't be true. And you're like, this is amazing. And you can't really celebrate it because it's a little weird. You can't high-five yourself in public. I have done that before with Jonathan Snook, and I got torn down in Brooklyn for doing that. And, you start to think about these things. So I thought about that emotion and what it's like and I want to celebrate it. And so I was at Big Spaceship at the time, and I said, we need an innovation lab. And they said, awesome. And I said, where are we going to put it? And they're like, you can have this closet. And I was like, awesome. I was like, what are you going to give me? They're like, whatever you bring in. I was like, awesome. So this is what I mean about creating opportunities for yourself. I went in and said, this is what I'm doing one Thursday or one morning of the week. I will work around it. I will make sure all my stuff is done. I'll do whatever, but I am doing this. And I just started doing it. I didn't even tell them at the beginning. They'd be like, where's Stacey? And, meanwhile, I'm off in a corner working. And so sometimes you need to do and ask and explain for forgiveness later, because when you tell them what you're doing, for example, on this project, when I told the CEO what I was doing, he's like, I don't want to know these things. Just go ahead and do it and show me after. And so sometimes you just need to ask for forgiveness. And so, again, I worked with Dave a little bit on this, and we did a Raspberry Pi. And the idea was, when you have this moment and you've coded something for like 50 lines and you haven't checked every single line, it magically works and you're the golden god, how do you celebrate that? How do you let people know that you did something awesome or that something awesome happened to you? And without being like going to the person beside you who really doesn't care, right? And so I wanted to build an installation where you went up, and when that happened, it was booty bump, so you had to like bump a booty with your booty. That's the idea. You're bumping booties. Not one cheek. That's cheating. 2 cheeks. So you need 2 sensors. And when you did that, you had a moment of glory, which is basically these really bad spotlights that would turn off and on. And then 8 seconds of Major Lazer would play. You can imagine how disruptive this was in the workplace, right? So we have, let's see if I can run through this.
We did it.
This is our prototype. You can hear me laughing.
It's ridiculous.
Right? And our prototype, it's Homer holding 2 donuts, making sure that you touch in the right places. This is nothing to look at. This is nothing to write home about. This is nothing to say that I have any kind of technical proudness that I'm, particularly proud of. But it's the idea of it's a prototype. Who gives a shit? Just make something, make it and revise it and make it look better later. Now, sometimes that doesn't always work, making it look better. Because sometimes you end up with this idea of like, hey, maybe I could just form my body out of chicken wire, because I've been watching a lot of Cupcake Wars, and they did this on Cupcake Wars. And I can just fill it with foam, and I can have my shape, and I can stuff my own jeans, right? And so people loved this because they basically took so many photos of this. I don't see the resemblance, but apparently that's my form in jeans. And again, here's a second iteration of a prototype. A couple hours later, set up on a stand, and this lasted for about 3 hours in the office before they said, yeah, okay, we've had enough of this. Because everyone and their dog was just going up like, boop, boop, all day long. Totally disruptive to the office in general. But again, something fun. And there's something really amazing about building something that's physical, where you can see the interaction people are having with it. How many people here are web devs? You could all put up your hands, because I can't see any of you anyways, so I'll just be like, everyone's got their hand up, right? But when you're a web dev and you put something up, the only way you have to know about engagement is either feedback or analytics. And both of those are just equally soulless, right? But when you build a physical interaction, you see What's happening here? How does someone figure it out? How do they interact? Do they have that moment of awe? Is there any enjoyment, right? And that's a whole different ballpark when you start playing with that. So going back to work, we had this, hey, I'm going to send a couple microcontrollers your way. Maybe you can build something that we can demo. They'll be super useful. Talking to the wrong girl, right? So one night, on a Friday night, fairly late, I will probably say that I might have had a couple bourbons. I was on Amazon, and I was searching for, things that I could maybe mod or work with. And my nephew at the time really loved Skrillex, right? He was like, everything was dubstep. So him and I text a lot, and he would send me these songs, and they're all dubstep. So I was like looking up, the history of all this stuff. And I was like, dubstep, man, I just don't get it, right? And because to me, this is what dubstep is. It's like, wah, 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 right? And then I started to think, well, if this is what you're into, that kind of looks like Skrillex. Just a little bit. And then I was like, maybe I just need to add some glasses. And then, 2 o'clock in the morning on Amazon, I find a T-Rex puppet. And I was like, oh, what about Skrill T-Rex? How awesome would that be, right? And I was like, how can I mod this? How entertaining would this be? And of course I bought it. And of course someone at Amazon is like, I don't understand the edge case happening in this buy scenario. Like, I don't know what to recommend her based on her previous purchases. So you're welcome, Amazon. And, go through, and I modded. I got some hair. I tried that. I tried to sew it in. And again, just getting away from the computer and getting a little bit more physical. I modded it. I put in a pressure sensor. You can see at the bottom. And literally, it's a $7 part. And it just gives you a value in between what's open and closed. And, I put in a Arduino Uno to start. And I tried to figure out, can these values correlate to something else? And I was like, well, if it's a Skrill T-Rex and we're talking dubstep, I got to be dropping some bass, right? Can I drop bass with this? Can I hook into something like MIDI in Ableton and actually drop bass on the fly, right? And so what I ended up building was something along these lines, where it's just a little sketch in processing. It's nothing crazy, but it's connecting to the items. You'll see my puppets trying to warm up. Right? So I had a proof of concept, right? Yes, I can do this. Yes, I can connect to MIDI. Yes, I can make this happen. And again, go back to my team. Hey, look at what I built. Does anyone just know what happened here? No one, everyone's like, what? And which became great, because it became this way to not only take what I needed to do, but bring it back and bring it back. And if I keep exposing you, I can make my little plan work, right? And so work's like, hey, that's great. Love what you're doing. Can you build something that, maybe is useful? They didn't say the word useful. So I was like, okay, part of my job is about doing stuff and talking about it. And so I wanted to explore some more physical things, and we're very lucky in my company. If you go to Seattle, otherwise known as the mothership, they have a big maker garage. To me, it's like what heaven is. It has everything you can imagine, and it's fully stocked. So imagine if Adafruit was there in real life with a CNC mill, with all the laser cutters, with all the 3D printers, embroidery machines, anything you can imagine, vinyl cutters, and people who know how to use it, right? And I discovered this little community within corporate America, right? And we have our own mailing list, and you start to find out there's people just like you. And it's an amazing, amazing thing. And so I started to realize, wow, I found my crew. And so I wanted to learn how to use a laser cutter. So I looked up how to create a box enclosure. There's an awesome little app that'll do it for you. I laser cut it out. I made like a little acrylic heart. And on the inside, I just ran some neopixels. That glue job and that wiring job is something to be embarrassed about. But I will own it. So I did that. I mounted it on some magnets so I can take it off and fix it if I need to or anything I need to do. And all of a sudden, I had 3 or 4 more new skills in a matter of days. And then what I did is I connected it to a particle photon, so $20 device, Wi-Fi enabled, very easy to use. You basically put an Arduino sketch on it, and then there's like a Node SDK that you can use with it. And I went to Twitter, and I was like, can I visualize who's followed me? Can I use the streaming API to figure out who's followed me, who's unfollowed me, who's favorited things, all that kind of stuff, and can I write custom visualizations for it? And so it started to look, something like that. And it will go through, and if you unfollow, for example, the heart drains out a couple times and pumps. And it's a pretty beautiful piece when you see it. The interesting thing about this one is, again, I'm not suggesting it's great or amazing, but I put this out there, got picked up by Adafruit. A couple people tweeted about it, and then I had people ask me if I would build them something like this. Hey, can you build me one for my favorite, NFL team? So I built 3 things based on this for people who paid me to do it, which I was like, oh, this is how it works. You're supposed to make it, show you can, and then you get work out of it. I found the grail, right? And so I got paid to do something I just truly loved, right? Which I thought was really awesome. And then I brought it back to work. And we had our little own team kind of hackathon. And I thought, I wonder if I can convince someone on my team to join me in building something that's a little bit useless. And so I don't have a working demo of this, but we built what we call shot, shot, shots. So you can imagine you have to play that song, shot, shot, shots. So automatically, or people are looking at you weird. And we took just a general container like this. We modded it. We put a solenoid, which can open and close it. Added a relay so that we could, hit it up with something like a photon or whatnot. And then we did buzzword bingo. And so we have some technology that can go through and automatically pick out words that you have in speech. And we connected those 2 together and ran some of our keynotes through it. And it would just, boop, open up, fill a shot, boop, open up, fill a shot, right? And we presented this to everyone again. And people started to get it. They started to get you know what? It doesn't have to be serious all the time. You can have a little bit of fun with what you're doing. Maybe this invention, maybe this playing brings value back to what you're doing, right? And so my plan was working. Just a little bit, but, we'll see. I came to a point where I was convincing others that what I was doing was important and that we could do this and it would be fun. And all of a sudden, I realized, what about other people? And I was still feeling a little burnt out. I was still feeling like I wasn't doing what I should be doing as a community member. And I discovered I'm going to look to others to help discover what playing means. And I looked to kids. And so at this time, for about a year, and I still do to this day, I donated a significant amount of my time to teaching kids how to make games. And I started something called Young Game Makers. And what happened here is that I was at a conference, and I met Amanda. I was doing a women's meetup the night before, something I normally don't attend. And I went to, and I was showing people how to use the Arduino, and I met Amanda. They brought high school students in. And I like to say Amanda saved me from myself, because Amanda was very interesting. She was, I think, 15 or 16 at the time. Her parents were both gamers. They met online, right? So can you imagine being brought up this way? Like your parents met online, you're involved in games. She could talk about level design like there was no tomorrow. She was very articulate about games, about the gaming industry, about game design. And I had said to her, have you ever made a game? And she said, no. And I said, I'm here for 3 days. You take advantage of it or you don't. And she did. She came and she found me, and I taught her C# and Unity. And over 3 days, we made a game. And this was at the Halifax Pop. It was a collision conference. And the interesting thing is everyone in the community were coming to see our progress. And thanks. And they would come to see her progress, and as a result of this, she got a job, a summer internship that summer. Working in a company, doing something similar, developing her technical skills, right? And this was the first time where I realized you did not see this. You did not see this. I have a cold, cold heart. Margaret Thatcher. Okay. This is the first time I realized that I could impact someone, significantly. And so I spent so much time teaching kids. This is Chase. Chase is going to be your boss one day. He has the most amazing ideas. And I started to work with kids, and we would teach them how to make games, and they would demo their games. And you started to see just this amazing ability for them to be entirely creative and not worrying about parameters and logistics and life and reality. And I learned so much from doing these things. We have this whole demo stream going up, for example. This is Zach. Zach made his own graphics for his game. He drew them, then scanned them in. I'm confused by the process, but I'm not going to question it. And had his own, all his own things. And then I got an email that looked much like this. But I think this is the part that kind of freaked me out. I was like, holy shit. Have you seen me after a couple bourbons? I am not a great person. And I realized that I was doing something meaningful. And so my advice to you in telling you all these stories and showing you all these little projects is to invite you to find time to play more in whatever way that might be. And so you don't want to just find yourself in that slump when you can control that a little bit. And it's okay that you're going to have failures and try things and not like them, right? She's my spirit animal, by the way. Love this woman. Because if you don't play more, you're going to be trying to solve the same problems the same way, right? And so you want to look for other options in trying to solve these problems on a day-to-day, right? And I think the most important thing when it comes to playing more is that you don't want, at the end of the day, to find yourself in a job, to feel stagnant, and then all of a sudden to realize that in some ways you might have not seen it coming, and that you also might have allowed it a little bit. And so you want to make sure complacency doesn't sneak up on you, right? So thanks for spending some time with me today.